Welcome back, viewers. You're watching India Tonight with me, Sumita, Kareer. Our top story, well, Jio has announced a series of new unlimited 5G plans, making the telecom player the first one to hike tariff rates. In fact, one of the most popular plans, that is the 239 rupees plan for 2060 validity, has seen the sharpest hike. The new plans will now be available to customers from July the 3rd. In fact, the overall range of these hikes is anywhere between 12% to 25%. But what will be the overall impact of these hikes on the industry in terms of expansion, growth, and on Jio? To discuss that and more, now joined by Mahesh Uppal. He's a telecom analyst. Thank you very much, Mahesh, for joining us this evening. First things first, I want to understand from you. Jio says that the new hike will not apply to existing users and that Jio Bharat and Jio phone users will continue to enjoy existing tariffs. Even though Jio Bharat is mostly for 4G users and for the affordable segment, how do you really see this strategy and how does this really have an impact on Jio's financials in terms of ARPUs and, of course, the overall EBITDA?
Yeah, you see, as far as Jio Bharat, etc., are concerned, as you know, these are relatively small segments of the market. And also, when you say it doesn't apply to existing subscribers, it just means that your current plan will go as it is, and then when you go for to renew your plan, you would have to pay the new one. That's how I understand it. And as you know, the vast majority of India's users, over 95% of them, are prepaid users. So expect that this change or this price hike will affect pretty much everybody. And I guess the low-income user will be particularly disappointed. But given that that is one of the largest segments of the market, if you really do want to make a difference to your ARPUs, or if you do want to collect some more revenue, then clearly that is where you would have to focus on. So I'm not surprised that Jio has done this. This was expected, and which, of course, as I mentioned earlier, does not mean that people wouldn't be disappointed. But this was expected. I would imagine that this would make significant difference.
Will be disappointed, but you mentioned a very important point, Manish, very important point that you mentioned about ARPUs, given that industry players have asked for substantial repair. If I quote the Airtel management on this front. Secondly, what do you think is the kind of impact that it'll have on the overall industry, given that other players in the ecosystem like Airtel and Vodafone will also resort to some sort of hikes?
Yes, absolutely. I think the overall revenues of the industry will certainly increase. And it's a bit early to actually predict actual numbers, or because I haven't been able to compute any of that. But I think this would be a great relief to both Airtel as well as Vodafone, because in the absence of this hike, they had no room to increase their prices. And as you can imagine, a player like Vodafone Idea, which is already under great stress, was struggling to raise prices and could not be given the market. Now I think it'll have room to increase prices, which again is not very good news for users. But I think for the three main players in the industry,
not good news for users. But let me ask you, when you say that there is room for the rest of the sector to also hike rates, but what kind of overall hikes are you penciling in for the sector in terms of percentage, and how many?
Well, very difficult to say that. I would imagine the kind of hikes that we are expecting are the kind that Jio has come up with. So I would not be surprised if comparable hikes also happen with the other two players. The exact I would imagine that they would want to be a bit more competitive than Jio, and maybe their hikes might be marginally lower. But certainly they would use this opportunity to hike their rates, as indeed they have said in the past that they are keen to do so.
Right. So I want to also understand from you, and this is something that I asked you earlier as well, on the kind of revenue impact that you see particularly for Jio with respect to these particular hikes. And of course, I want to understand for the overall sector as well, what kind of a growth at this point are you really penciling in, given the kind of hikes that some of these players will take? In fact, some of the analysts we've spoken to earlier, they are factoring in a hike of 15 to 18%, ARPU increase of 15 to 18%. So give us your perspective, on Jio individually, and of course on the impact on the overall industry in terms of growth and revenue generation.
Well, I would pretty much agree with most of the numbers that you pointed out. I think that is the kind of impact I would also expect in the industry. And certainly, this is something that you can translate into a comparable increase in the sector's revenues. It's too early because I haven't done the calculations to the last penny, as it were. But I do expect a very comparable increase in the overall revenues of the sector as well as the ARPUs of the companies.
Right. So you said that this is not good news for users, and rightly so perhaps, but do you see any kind of movement of Jio users to other platforms, given that many of these users actually came to Jio because it was affordable?
That's a good question. And the truth is, I think that Telecom is by and large a vanilla service. And if you look at the actual churn rates of all the operators, you will find that there is extremely high. Several crore customers every month change their operator. So it doesn't look like the movement is going to be one way or is one way. I think it is true that if Jio is not as attractive as the others are, then maybe some movement. But I doubt if the other players are in any way going to become significantly cheaper than Jio for there to be an incentive to move from Jio. That I don't think. But yes, there is a very high level of churn in all three operators on a monthly basis. But I don't think price will be the key.
You change the dynamics of the overall industries. Right.
Sorry?
So high level of churn, sir, you said. I want to understand from you this one final question. How does it really impact the dynamics of the sector going forward? What are the kind of trends that you see in the sector?
Well, I guess where the difference may be is when, in terms of new users, who then will not see Jio as a particularly bargain entry point. There was a time when Jio's low tariffs itself were significant reason for people to go and subscribe to Jio. That probably will not continue. But given that the others will be comparable, I think that may not really work to any great disadvantage of Jio, because we have a moderately mature market, and now things are really the operators are actually focused more on increasing data usage rather than subscriber numbers. The actual subscriber numbers are less of a focus for operators than they used to be, say, 5-6 years ago. Now it's really about generating more revenues from data, and I think operators will focus on trying to do that.
And that's already is in the works, given the push that we've seen in the telecom sector from 5G, and of course, now that AI is also coming into the ecosystem, we'll have to see how that really plays into boosting the profitability of these companies. But will be interesting to see in the days ahead on how these tariff hikes really change the competitive dynamics in the industry. On that note, thank you very much, sir, for joining us and sharing your perspectives on India Tonight. Meanwhile, let's move on and look at.
If you like this video, then like, share and subscribe to ET Now.